So, I heard you're looking for a go-to source for entertainment.
Wait for it.
Gaming?
Wait for it.
Anime?
Plus Ultra!
Mr. Eric Almighty and Phil the Filipino? Yeah, they've got you covered. And all you gotta do is... wait for it. This is the Wait For It podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wait For It podcast. I am your co-host, Phil Smith, aka Phil the Filipino. And joining me as always is your other co-host, Mr. Eric Almighty. And Eric, here we are with the March edition of the international feature, and changing it up as the first 2 months of the year have been a show and a film that I recommended. You are now back in control of the international feature, and boy, we are off to a really solid start here in the year of 2024, as it generally has been a really, really good experience when it comes to these international films. We're just coming off of the Oscars, where a whole bunch of international films were represented. Godzilla Minus One took home an Oscar, which is just fantastic. Shout out to that team. And we have a film that won an Oscar just a few years ago in the spirit of the Academy Awards season. So, Eric, glad that you had come across this one, because honestly, even though it has that acclaim, has so many awards and recognition, I'd never heard of this. And of course, it stars one of our favorite actors here today.
That was the whole reason behind it, Phil. I've had this movie on my radar for a while, and I understand last year I did a lot of heavy-duty international films. So I took the feedback. Me and Phil had a conversation. He got us on some lightheartedness. And while this is still in the spirit of what I think a lot of international films bring, which is a serious undertone and an interesting story to tell, sometimes a dark story to tell, I feel like, Phil, this had enough of that fun element or comedic element that made it interesting, right? Also, it being a nice brisk 2 hours really, I think, helped. But it's all, I would say, the glue of this story. It's all glued together by Mads Mikkelsen, who is the main actor for this movie and who we are huge fans of, from Hannibal, the television show, and basically any movie he's in. He's always on top as far as his performance. He's always hitting the mark. And I just think that this was a recipe for success. And I'm glad that we ended up putting it on our radar, because otherwise, I don't know when we would have ever seen this movie if we hadn't done this series.
Yeah, it is perfect for this series. It is another film, comparing it to what we watched last month in The Big Sick, a darker comedy, another film that does not stray away from really tough situations and tough discussions, and that always just makes for, I think, a better film. So we're going to jump into all of that here in just a moment. Want to welcome in any brand new listeners that may be checking out the podcast for the first time. Maybe we just met you this past weekend at Collective Con. Thank you so much for everybody that stopped by the table, said hi for the first time, introduced themselves for the first time, people that we have seen over and over again in these conventions. Just honestly, even though there were some frustrations, seeing you guys and interacting with you guys was a blast. And obviously, Eric, everybody that came to our panel and made it so fun. So it just felt like 45 minutes wasn't enough. We could have hung out with you guys for a couple more hours. But we want to thank you so much. So for anybody that's listening, whether you're new or if you've been here for a while, make sure you stick around to the end of the episode. We'll let you know where you can find all the rest of our content. But Eric, with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right in to this episode. Once again, this film is called Another Round. It came out in 2020. And very short synopsis here from IMDb per usual. 4 high school teachers consume alcohol on a daily basis to see how it affects their social and professional lives. It was directed by Thomas Vinterberg, and as you mentioned, Eric, stars Mads Mikkelsen, but not to be overshadowed the rest of the cast, which we will get into here in just a moment. Also, very, very solid. We'll probably talk about them as we go on. Eric, and also kind of want to go a little bit more into the premise of this film. So, I talked about the synopsis there. So basically, they discuss a a scientist who, in their studies, and correct me, Eric, if I'm really just kind of going off the cuff with this, but the scientists believe that we were all born with a certain blood alcohol level at 0.5, and that we should be pretty much be operating at that level all the time for the sake of peak human ability. And they are going to test that theory, over the course of days, weeks, months, however long this experiment is going to go on. And, I think it made for a really, really interesting premise. Each one of these characters, Eric, is in a different stage of their life. Some of them are happy, some of them are pretending to be happy, and some of them, are not doing a very good job at masking, some of that darkness that we kind of alluded to just a moment ago. So I think, because I want to talk about the cast here right up front, this really felt like, if you told me this was just a documentary following 4 friends around, I would have believed you. Like, I would have believed that these 4 have known each other for years, and, they probably have. But I'm talking about, like, if they had been friends all the way through childhood and, they all stayed in the same town and they've known each other for decades, I would have believed you, because the chemistry is that good. Honestly, I saw a lot of ourselves in these characters, and when they were spending time together and busting each other's balls and, just having a good time. I saw a lot of that in this film, and I think, honestly, right off the bat, that's just that is what hooked me right away.
Yeah, the movie is not only relatable, but it's just a very human story, it felt like. With all the elements, all the themes, all of the situations that it was carefully and delicately balancing. I think it was done very, very well. Phil, I'll leave some of the performances and the highlights there to talk, for you to kind of highlight. But I want to definitely shout out the director, Thomas Vinterberg, who I was not familiar of his work. And he also worked with Mads Mikkelsen in a 2012 movie called The Hunt, which I've also heard about in these same circles that I heard about this movie. So just don't be surprised. This is kind of interesting, Phil. We have like a Danish film in our library of international feature now. Don't be surprised if not only we come back to this director, but again, also another Mads Mikkelsen film as well. So definitely got to shout that out. I thought the movie was very, very well done. Cinematography, again, very, very good. And the performances, Phil, as you're going to mention, absolutely stand out.
Yeah, we have, of course, Mads Mikkelsen as Martin, who is essentially our main character, but we also want to shout out Thomas Bo Larsen, who played Tommy, Magnus Malang, who played Nikolaj, and I'm gonna put in the Brooklyn Nine-Nine clip here, Nikolaj. It's pronounced Nikolaj, and Lars Ranth as Peter. Apologies if I mispronounced any of those names, but yeah, just a natural chemistry there. Again, at its core, a very normal, mundane story, you might even say. It's not like these guys are rock stars or public figures or anything like that. They're high school teachers. Their job is, and their lives are very monotonous. They're very repetitive. And I think we have all been there, where we feel like we are stuck in a rut, and we are looking back at our past selves, maybe even our past relationships, whether that be a relationship we used to be in or a relationship that we are currently in. I think we've all been to that point where we're kind of reevaluating everything, and you're looking for that spark, and they come across this very interesting premise, and they decide to test it out. And, it follows that story where it's like, hey, this is going pretty well. Things are all clicking. They're coming together, especially for our main character in Martin. And, you really kind of get the sense that, like, oh, maybe they're onto something here. And then, of course, it takes a turn because, I don't think that this science was really, really checked out for the longest. I would like to know how long the scientist really went with this theory before coming to the conclusion, maybe that our main characters did a little bit later. But Eric, the ride itself, because at first it kind of seemed like they were all grouped together. It was all going relatively evenly for all of them. And then, man, the twists and turns that each one of them take throughout this journey was very, very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and they all run parallel to the main character's story. So Martin, we really see I would say, a majority of the effects, if not all the effects, how it affects him, his family, his daily interactions. I think this movie really does a great job of just simply putting these characters in a world, in a situation, and seeing what happens. And that's the most interesting part, Phil, because obviously with anything that goes well, you want it to go a little bit better. For everything that's good, you want it to be great, right? And unfortunately, when it comes to alcohol, there is a real addiction problem that can come along with that. And sometimes it's unintentional. And while this story isn't necessarily an addiction story, there were elements of that where it's like, where do you draw the line from wanting to push the envelope to where it gets out of control? And they blur those lines so clearly for us as an audience that it was just a really good time as a viewer, even though, again, while we won't get into spoilers for this episode necessarily, this definitely does spiral out of control for these characters for the most part. There's a lot of consequences that come into play, and it's sad, but again, unlike some of the movies we've seen before, there are those comedic undertones and that sense of a human story here that just kind of make it all work.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of, a lot of films you see where it's very bit heavy or very ad lib heavy. These are real conversations from real people. And I think, again, just to harken back to The Big Sick, there's nothing over the top really in that. It's all everyday humor. There's no laugh track or anything like that. So while we are in the midst of what is a dark comedy, that is mentioned in the Wikipedia page. There's so much there to chuckle about. I wasn't like rolling on the floor or anything like that with anything that happened here, but it's all very believable, again, grounded in reality, and sometimes, and unfortunately, like you said, Eric, this is a very real problem. These are things that we have seen in people that we know, whether we're really close to them or we have watched from afar because we know them somehow. So this is a story that I think everybody is going to have some sort of connection to, and they're also going to generate a attachment to a different character. I think you could show this people to 10 friends, and each one of and you would get a bunch of different answers and combination of who their favorite character was, and I think that's great.
Do not throw combinations in here. So just like it took me out completely for what we're doing. Do not.
To be fair, I wasn't trying.
You're gonna have to add it in here for context now. That's
Probably
another thing you're gonna have to add.
To
the video portion. God, Phil, that threw me off so much. And doesn't really transition well to what I was gonna mention. Doesn't transition well at all.
That's my bad.
Yeah. So this is unfortunate. I'm just gonna hold on to this for like a second. I'm gonna hold on to what I was gonna mention. Phil, are there any other? Let me ask you this: is the one thing I was worried about with recommending this film to you was that dark theme, right? And that the comedy is dark comedy, and it's not exactly like belly aching laughing. Like with Banshees of Inisherin, we had a hell of a time. We really laughed at that movie, but this wasn't that type of dark comedy. It was a little bit darker than comedy. So I was just kind of curious, did it help that the movie was just a brisk 2 hours? Because I do feel like we spent more time with the fun times with these characters versus the times where shit hits the fan and their lives are basically being ruined, right? Again, that's the good and bad, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde side of this story. Did that help with your viewing experience at all? Or what do you think kind of made those elements work the most together?
I think that certainly helped because, well, here's the thing. Because I knew going into this, obviously, just watching the trailer and hearing about it from you, it's not a, bang, bang, bang film. Like it's a slow burn. And whenever you get storytelling like this and characters like this and also music, The music plays a big part in this film, and it's really, really great here as well. As long as you're prepared for that kind of experience, then you'll be all set. If you go in again expecting just because it's a foreign film, expecting a similar experience to a Banshees of Inisherin, you're going to be disappointed. Like, you're setting yourself up for failure. This is a totally different type of dark comedy. Same thing with, if we just talk about in the rom-com space, like we said, with The Big Sick, and comparing it, it is a rom-com, but it's also a very dark comedy. So if you're not in the right mindset, I think maybe you'll be in for a little bit of a shock. But once you get settled into the story and get used to the characters, I think you'll be perfectly fine. I think one thing, honestly, and I don't know if maybe you take away from something else, like you said, you spend a lot of time on the highs and maybe not enough time on the lows. And that maybe there's one character in there who has an unfortunate ending that maybe we could have seen a little bit more of that. Would you have liked to maybe follow that character a little bit more, Eric, or are you glad we obviously primarily stuck with Martin?
I do think it was good that we stuck with Martin for the most part. Again, Mads Mikkelsen's performance here is excellent. One of the best performances probably of his career that I followed so far. He's such a great actor, not only when it comes to dialogue, but also specifically with his eyes, his motions, his movements. Those things are really top notch as an actor.
There's a subtlety to him. There's a subtlety.
There's a subtlety, there's a grace. We've seen him in roles where he can be an absolute menace with that same subtlety, which is extremely scary.
Doctor Strange, yeah.
Again, even in Doctor Strange,
Your name
he
is
wasn't
Dr.
awful.
Doctor?
Again, even in Doctor Strange, not awful. We knew he could have been more, right? Like, we absolutely knew that was a wasted role for him. But everything he's been in, he has that subtlety too. And Phil, I don't know that I would have wanted to spend more time in this movie because this movie already had a lot of sad things around it. I don't know if you knew this. I didn't until tonight. So this is post watching the movie. But when Another Round, obviously there was an Oscar acceptance that was happening. The story's heavy topics, a lot of that had to do with not necessarily directly, but it was so correlated to what happened in real life to the director. Vindenburg's daughter actually died 4 days into shooting Another Round due to a highway accident. And she was supposed to be in the film as Martin's daughter. And there were supposed to be some of those elements there. So that was definitely something that sucked to find out afterwards. And I'm sure leading into the movie, just filming it, you could see a lot of the comments. You can look at this online, obviously, but a lot of the comments were she would have wanted us to continue filming. He wanted to do it in her honor. And I think that's why this movie feels so humanized, is because there was a lot of heart put into it, and obviously in her honor. So absolutely sad to hear that and to read that for the first time tonight. But yeah, I just happened to pull it up, and it kind of makes sense why the movie's tone was what it was. And now that I know it's kind of an ode to his daughter, it makes me enjoy what I saw even more.
There can be a lot of beauty in tragedy, which is, it's unfortunate how we have to get there, but it can result, and it has resulted in some of the best storytelling and that we have ever seen. So yeah, that's definitely devastating to hear, but beautiful that they were able to rally together and still make the film. I can't even imagine what it would be like, on set. This is a film where there's not really a whole lot of go-tos when it comes to like a YouTube documentary or a YouTube recap. There was like a very short one that I watched regarding the ending, which we may or may not discuss here. Kind of up in the air about how people kind of what's the word that I'm looking for? How they depict the ending. Could go one of a few different ways. But yeah, that's definitely sad to hear. But again, I am happy they got the recognition that they deserved, and they were able to honor her in a very special way. Obviously, the very peak when it comes to recognition in the film world.
Yeah, and this movie really deserved the praise that it got. Again, the Oscar nomination, the acceptance, of the award, like all of that, well deserved. Shocked. I don't think Mads was even nominated for Best Actor. So would have been really interesting to see who was up for Best Actor that year. But again, really great performance from him and the rest of the supporting cast. Just a really wonderful movie overall, Phil. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because again, this was one of those things where I wanted to make sure it wasn't too dark. It wasn't just like you want to go curl up in a ball and go to sleep after type of movie. And it didn't help we had a 3-day con before you ended up watching it. So I also was very worried how that was going to go.
Emotions were all over the place this weekend, so could have gone either way.
You made it through. But is there anything else you do want to talk about regarding the film? If you want, we can talk about that ending. I would just put a clear spoiler warning for everybody here verbally and on the screen. We're going to talk about how the movie ends. I wouldn't say it would spoil the experience for you, but it is an ending a lot of people I've heard really like, and that there is a lot of deep meaning behind it, and I think you're about to dig into that. So if you want to completely miss that, this will probably be our last topic of the episode. Watch it and come back for the rest of the conversation. But Phil, if you don't have anything else, I'm cool jumping into that here.
I'm definitely going to put that video back in. Who's like, get out! Get the hell out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
Okay.
Get out! Get out! That's going to be the spoiler video. That's the official spoiler video for the...
No.
Get out! But, yeah, so the way that it was interpreted on the YouTube video that I had watched is, obviously we are some time removed from the loss of their friend, and obviously all the kids are, the high school kids are celebrating after graduation. The teachers go out, celebrate with them, and we finally get to see, Martin dazzle us with these dance moves. He is killing it out there. I had no idea he could move like that, Eric. It was incredible to see. But the person that I had watched, the YouTube video that I watched, and you know what, I'll put it I'll give them a shout out. I'll put them in the show notes of this episode. I can't remember the name of the channel, but the way that they had interpreted it is that this is coming from Martin's perspective, which is why it's a lot more lively. That's why he's doing all these moves. That's why it's so extravagant. And, again, this is highlighting the highs of what they went through. This is the positive of what they went through. They're kind of straying away from obviously what they had just lost, what it cost them, right? And they were lucky. Honestly, like Martin was lucky to have just lost, possibly, his family, and that might only be temporary. That might be on the mends. We're not sure. So he is highlighting the good that came out of this, which may not be the right thing. He may end up back on that dark path again after this, or whatever is actually happening. So I guess, how did you decipher the ending, Eric? Do you think that it was, again, all of his mind? Obviously, we get the final freeze frame shot, which I think is excellent. The music again here is very, very good. Do you think he has turned a corner and things are going to go really, really well for him? Or do you think he is heading again back down a bad path and he is going to lose it all after essentially escaping maybe a tragedy himself?
I think it's definitely up for interpretation. But I do think it's going to be hard now to come off of that. I mean, to be that person that you started to really like. Again, he essentially was going through life, going through the motions. And then once he figured out he didn't like the person he had turned into, and he was in love with this person that he became, he really liked the person he was being. He liked how that made him feel. I do feel like my interpretation was that he is going to have a battle in front of him, probably for the rest of his life. Like, that definitely did a lot of damage because that's out of character for him from the beginning of the film. He didn't want to dance. He didn't want to do any of that. Complete 180. And you know what? Drink in hand, right? So I think that absolutely was something. If he wasn't drinking, maybe I would take that interpretation differently. But I think because, he had a drink in hand at points, during that ending, sequence. I definitely think that was something to note.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a totally different ending if he is like, no thank you, but still is having a great time. So, yeah, what was your interpretation of it if you have watched the film? If you've now come back after taking a couple hours to watch another round. It is available on Hulu, so if you have a subscription, you can watch it as part of your Hulu subscription. So it was very easy to get to. I believe it may also be available on Prime, but I didn't 100% check. But again, Eric, fantastic performances, really great chemistry between the cast. Again, just to highlight the music, continuing to do so, and then finding the beauty and the heartbreak in the mundane. You brought up a good point there where he was on cruise control and, he found a person that he liked and it seemed like his significant other liked, and also his students, that whole kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it a intervention in the beginning of the film as far as his teaching goes, that obviously weighed very heavy on him, and then having a whole new relationship with them. It was brilliantly done, and a lot of people think so as well. As we'll transition into the reception of this film. Obviously, Eric, it won an Oscar, so it has the highest praise. There's no bit of praise that we can lump on this film where they're like, man, I got this trophy. But did you hear that podcast of those two guys in Jacksonville, Florida? They really enjoyed the movie. So let me just throw this Oscar away, and I'm going to play this episode on loop. But as far as Rotten Tomatoes goes, 93% tomato meter score from critics, 90% audience score, and then over on Letterboxd, Eric, it has an average score of 4.1 from the fans. And I'll go first here as far as Letterboxd grades. That's where I landed, essentially a 4. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and certainly one of my favorite movies that I've seen this year. And, in 2020, Eric, we were watching Parasite and Squid Game, so we had just turned the corner. A Train to Busan, we had just turned the corner into our international film journey. So unfortunately, this wouldn't have even been in our radar really back then. So happy that you had come across it, all these years later, and we got a chance to discuss it, talk about it, and hopefully give other people the opportunity to check it out as well. Where did you land on your Letterboxd grade?
We're in sync here. 4 out of 5. Again, could it be somewhere in the middle of a 3.5 and a 4? Because I don't necessarily see me bringing a friend along to watch this movie. Sure. But I do think it warrants enough to be a 4, very much in the same sense that another international film we've covered in the past year that was also Oscar nominated, Past Lives. I do think that movie as well. Would I bring a friend to it? Probably not, because I don't want them to see me cry. But could I? Could it be the right person? Yeah. And if this movie was on, I would watch it. I don't know that I would just think about it twice. And that's kind of what gives it the small edge to be as close to a 4 as possible. So that's where it's landing. And that's not a detriment at all. Again, this is the type of movie that is really good, but are you going to have repeat viewings? Not unless you absolutely think this is a masterclass. And if you do too, and I know I've definitely heard people say this is one of their favorite international films ever. That makes sense. But for me, it was just what it was, and that was a fantastic film. So I wanted to show it that appreciation with my score, and I hope I did that with a 4 out of 5.
Oh man, Eric, we can now make a international film list on Letterboxd.
We should have enough under our belt at this time, and I think we should. That's something I would like us to try to do this year, is to have an open Letterboxd list for Late to the Party, for International Feature. That would be really, really fun. And then, of course, we're keeping track of our 2024 movies. Phil has 50 already, and I'm at 2.
No.
So March is going to fix a lot of that for me.
I've slacked off a little bit after Madam Web, which has made me not want to go to the cinema. So luckily, Eric is putting together Dune Day, so hopefully I can redeem myself. And in case you were wondering, Eric, above Real Steel. So since this is how we're going, I rank this higher than Real Steel. So just to let so that people are continuing to keep up with the actual scoring system that we really care about.
It's really
higher than Real Steel.
No, Real Steel is not even an international film. Okay,
I'm just talking about movies that I've seen in 2024 in general. So
I hate
Hugh Jackman is Australian. So yeah,
no. That's where I draw the line. That's where I draw the line, Philip.
I have great international films from Hugh Jackman, such as Logan, The Greatest Showman, all international films.
You couldn't think of any. Yeah,
I couldn't. I was like, what else is he in? Mamma Mia, is that him? No, that's Pierce Brosnan.
That's the complete opposite. Yes, Hugh Jackman has had a wonderful combination of films. Yeah.
Combination. We should probably end there, huh? We should probably move on.
Yeah, Real Steel will do that to you. That's what had happened. We talked about this.
We're ending on a Real Steel high every single time.
No, we talked about this.
I mentioned it last month, so I had to
film,
continue. So like every single month and be like, was this better than Real Steel? So
that's
people want to know.
That's crazy.
The people want to know, Eric.
I'll tell you this. This is totally off topic as we end the episode. If you say Dune Part 2 is not as good as Real Steel, I'm telling you now, we're not going to do this anymore. I can't take you seriously anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it will be a problem. Dune Part 1, fine.
Like three out of 5. Severe lack of robot fighting.
and Australians.
Severe lack of Australians, robot fighting, and Evangeline Lilly. 3 out of 5. Is there another Evangeline Lilly movie with robots? Oh, probably Avengers or Ant-Man or something. So,
all right. Well, we've completely lost control of the episode.
Yeah.
One thing I know we want to do a little bit more is kind of promote the next episode for the series, and we're starting to now get into the habit now with this new schedule that we've done for the podcast. We've got that. So for next month's international feature, before we get into where you can find future episodes of the podcast, next episode is going to be Belle, which is a anime film, basically a modern day retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I think it'll be really interesting to see, and I definitely want to throw some more anime type movies, films, shows, things of that nature, like we did with Blue Eye Samurai. I definitely want to do more of that on this particular series. So look forward to that for next month. But Phil, where can people catch up to our catalog in the meantime?
Yeah, for any of those brand new listeners that are still here, make sure to check out the Linktree link of our show notes. So not only, you can find other episodes of International Feature, you can find our other series, Late to the Party, The Game Room Where It Happens, our bonus episode of What Did I Miss, and, of course, Creator Spotlight. If you are a gaming fan, our next episode will be The Game Room Where It Happens, where we will be talking about Helldivers. So if you have been itching for more Helldivers content, we will have that for you here very, very soon. Also in that Linktree link, you will find all of our social media pages. The 2 are the 3 that you should keep up with the most, being Instagram, TikTok, as well as our growing Discord community. If you want to support the show, you can do a couple of things. One, share it on your social media. Tag us. Let people know that you're listening. Let us know that you are listening. We always appreciate it when you guys reach out. And you can also head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can. Leave us a 5-star review. It really shoots us up the charts. It makes a huge difference in terms of exposure, things of that nature, podcast algorithm, all that boring shit. So that all is very, very helpful. But if you find yourself wanting to support the show, maybe just a little bit extra, go the extra mile, Eric will actually let you know how to do that.
And like Phil mentioned, we have a ton of free options. For example, you could join our community that we're building on Discord. And, of course, all of our social media. But if you want to go that extra mile, you want to go beyond and support the podcast, you can go directly to our Buzzsprout page, or you can go to Patreon, where you can subscribe and become a patron like Stefan and Breyer, who are helping support the show. And they are getting perks like early access and behind the scenes to episodes like this one, along with many other options and tiers that you can select from. But if you don't find yourself in a giving mood, or you can't, all those free options are equally as valuable, and we truly appreciate that support. Whether you leave us a like, you come to one of our in-person panels, or you just simply listen to the episode, we really appreciate you. With that being said, my name is Mr. Eric Almighty. That is my co-host, Phil, the Filipino. And please don't forget, we release new episodes on the podcast every Wednesday with bonus content on platforms like TikTok, as long as it's around, and all you got to do is wait for it.
So, I heard you're looking for a go-to source for entertainment.
Wait for it.
Gaming?
Wait for it.
Anime?
Plus Ultra!
Mr. Eric Almighty and Phil the Filipino? Yeah, they've got you covered. And all you gotta do is wait for it. This is the Wait For It podcast.